Welcome to Envision Broadcasting, the station designed to encourage, equip, and empower you for growth and success presents The Momentum Shift. A show where we get inspired, we get moving, and we get results. Every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern with your host, Eric Collier. He's the mayor of motivation and mental quicksand expert, bringing you inspiring interviews and empowering stories that will help to improve lives. If you're ready to start making the impossible possible, then you've joined the right show, because the Momentum Shift is what you've been looking for.
Welcome to the Momentum Shift, a show where we get inspired, get moving, and get results. Every day you wake up, there's something that you want. And every day you wake up, there's something standing between you and what you want. Now, it might feel like an uphill battle, like the odds are against you and that getting what you desire is not even possible for you. But what I want you to know is that there's still hope, that there's still a way you can make it happen. And the way is through this radical change that will elevate your life to heights you have only imagined. I call it the momentum shift. Not just some catchy phrase or momentary idea. The momentum shift is real. It's a profound shift in your mindset. It's a profound shift in your actions. And it's a profound shift in your entire approach to life. It's about breaking free from the chains that bind you so that you can start stepping into your full potential. And it all begins with you believing in yourself, trusting in the power that lies within you, the power to overcome obstacles, the power to turn setbacks into stepping stones, and more importantly, the power to defy the limitations that others might place on you. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. So that's why you have to embrace the challenges that come your way as opportunities for growth. See every roadblock as a chance to learn, adapt, and come out stronger on the other side, because you will. The momentum shift is about finding strength in those times of adversity, transforming the setbacks you face into fuel for your journey of your life. And you're going to have to surround yourself with this tribe of dreamers and doers, because the whiners and complainers are not going to be able to help you. You want people in your corner who inspire you, who will support you unconditionally, because their unwavering belief in your potential will ignite the fire within you, propel you forward, even in the face of all doubt, even when it's your own. Trust me, the momentum shift is not about settling for the status quo, not even close. It's about envisioning the life you want, the life you deserve, and then taking consistent, intentional steps to make it a reality. It's about acting boldly and fearlessly, knowing that each small action accumulates into this powerful force for change. And when you stumble, as we all do, remember that failure is not the end. It's a chance for you to grow and refine your path. The momentum shift teaches you that you got to embrace failure as a necessary part of the journey. It's a lesson, not a defeat. I'll repeat that. It's a lesson, not a defeat. And every day you have this choice, a choice to let life happen to you or to take control and steer it in the direction you desire. The momentum shift empowers you to take that control you need to become the author of your own story. So I tell you, you've got to embark on this transformative journey of the momentum shift. Embrace the radical change, because it's going to elevate your life to the heights that you've only imagined. Then when you do, start to dream bigger, act boldly, and believe in yourself. The power lies in your hands to create the life you've always wanted. You've got to start the momentum shift today, and then you'll be able to watch as the world opens up before you and fill you with possibilities that you never thought were possible for you. It's the momentum shift. It's what you've been waiting for.
The Momentum Shift. A show where we get inspired, we get moving, and we get results.
Now let's dive into today's show. This week, ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited to have with me Dr. Giuseppe Fielder. He is an organizational leadership expert. He can talk to you from boots on the ground experience with leadership in the forms or in the aspects of a husband, a father, military, DOD experience as well. So I want to welcome you today, our guest speaker, Dr. Giuseppe Fielder. Giuseppe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Eric. Glad to be here.
So I want to start off with the number one question. Who is Dr. Giuseppe Fielder?
And why is leadership so important in his life?
That's it's a good question. I think that I come from I grew up in Pittsburgh. Came from a very working class background. My dad was a cop. My mother worked for FedEx, and I grew up in a city of Pittsburgh where strong work ethic was basically central to who you are and who you were expected to be. And so grew up in Pittsburgh, graduated high school barely, went on to the military and kind of straightened myself out. And then from the military went into Penn State, graduated from Penn State, got into the intelligence community and been working in DoD for probably about 20 years now. And I think what got me interested in leadership is probably my experience in the military and seeing the best of leadership and then seeing the worst of leadership and looking at those two different outcomes. And I think that's what kind of initially got me interested in it. And I like that feeling that good leaders gave you when you're being led well. So as a soldier, they instill that very, very early. You're expected to take that a leadership role really early in your career. They don't wait till later. I was probably 20 years old when I was in Bosnia leading a special operations team, and that was a huge experience for me. And I made a ton of mistakes, but it was definitely a formative experience. And then from there, came back, went to language school, then got another bite at the apple as far as leadership. And I got deployed to Iraq in 2003 during the initial invasion. And I got to do things over and got to do things a lot better. Still made a lot of mistakes, but I feel that, I took a lot of the mistakes that I learned in Bosnia and I was able to apply them to our tour in Iraq. And we came back with 10 toes and 10 fingers. So we're all right.
Very important. Very important. And from veteran to veteran, man, I applaud you for your service. Thank you for your time and commitment and dedication.
Yeah. Happy Independence Day.
Yeah, likewise, dude, brother. Likewise. So, you touched on some things, man. You don't always know what you're getting into and you don't do things right. Do you think that mindset of I have to do things right keeps you from moving forward?
I always look at it as kind of the I don't know if you've read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset.
Yes.
So I've kind of looked at it from the fixed and growth mindset piece of it, where when I look back at it, things that have impeded me were more the fixed mindset. And I would say throughout my career, probably the biggest impediment to me is just the fear of failure and having that expectation that you have to succeed out of the gate in everything that you do, and you have to be great, and that can drive some really bad decisions. I think personally, I made some decisions throughout my career, throughout my life that, had I had less of a fear of failure, I might have done differently. And so I think that piece of the fixed mindset is something that I've continually tried to work on.
Yeah. I think that's great because you talk about fixed mindset, and I always talk about, being a mental quicksand expert. One of those things that can keep you from moving forward is believing that you're done. And I want to touch on something, man. You're a doctor now. So at the point you talked about barely graduating high school, I've got pictures of me struggling through high school as well, sleeping in the yearbook. I got a picture of me sleeping in class. And mind you, that was my second year of geometry. I won't go into it, but yeah. But that mindset of continuing to go through the education, even though you struggle through high school. Talk to me about that mindset. When did this book, Carol Dweck's mindset, come into play, and just what encouraged you to continue your schooling?
I would say Dweck came into place several years ago. What kind of straightened me out was just I think what was keep me down a bad path was just lack of discipline. And once I kind of got that settled, and I largely credit it to the Army, and I started to have success in junior college, and then went on to language school and had success there. I realized that I was putting probably an artificial limit to my capabilities, at least academically.
Like what you said there, the artificial limit, because that's really true. What we do, we set a goal, and that's based off of what we believe we can accomplish, but we can
100%.
accomplish so much more. So I love that. I'm sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah. And I think that what has kept me going is just the more than anything, the desire to learn. And I had no intention really of getting a Ph.D. I ended up in a position where I was very comfortable with team leadership and working in small teams. And several years ago, probably 2015, 2016, I was put in charge of a division where I had a bunch of team leaders that were now reporting to me, and I had a team of about 24 on several teams. And that was a very different experience, leadership wise. And you're now a manager that are leading other leaders, and you're instead of working with subject matter experts, you're now working directly with leaders. And it was I realized what got me here isn't going to get me there. So I started looking at academic programs, and I needed to go back to school for leadership or management. So I was looking at MBA programs, and ran across the program with Indiana Wesleyan that I ended up completing. And so when I first started thinking about it. And I think within the first year, you realize everything that you're doing wrong. And I think my opinion of myself as a leader was probably much higher than my capabilities of a leader at the time. And that first year, they really just strip a lot of that off. And you realize all the things that you're doing wrong. And if you approach it from, growth mindset, right?
Yeah.
And, you're looking at it from a open-minded perspective, you realize how much more you have to learn, right? And you start getting exposed to some of these folks that are leading Fortune 500s and consulting at that level. You realize that, the world of leadership, it's an ocean, and I hadn't even left the bay, right? In my level of knowledge. And I think that, like, when folks throw around the term subject matter expert, it makes me super uncomfortable, because there's just so much to know about leadership. And you can be a subject matter expert in something very, very specific about leadership. But that takes decades to build that, right? And I think that gave me the humility that even at the once you obtain your doctorate, there's just so much to learn, and you're just starting. And that the only thing the doctorate kind of speaks to is just your work ethic. I was no smarter than anybody that dropped out of the program, didn't complete. It's probably more than anything my work ethic. And I was probably just not smart enough to quit at several junctions. So
that's what makes it worth it. Not smart enough to quit.
Yeah.
You just keep going. You're finding the solution.
100%. And I think that just being in that program, it's kind of given me a a desire to continue to teach at the adjunct level.
Yeah.
And just stay involved in the literature and do research and just to continue to learn.
Yeah, I like that. You talked about, so I was once asked a question. I was in this job interview, man, at a time when I was really struggling. I was laid off for 352 days, and it took me a while to get back into my role as an analyst. And I went on this job interview and I thought, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for. This is my expertise. And they asked me a question that just threw me for a loop. They said, name a great leader you've ever worked for. And then they asked some of the habits and behaviors that you incorporate from learning from them into your daily life. And it threw me for a loop. Great leaders. I didn't work for any great generals. I didn't work for Schwarzkopf. I didn't work for any of these guys. You know what I mean? You know, the ones that they always label. And so I was thrown for a loop. But I think it's important. You talked on the habits and behaviors are very important, right? You said that growth mindset, continuing to learn, right? And not giving up. And that's something, how do you encourage let's say your team or those who are around you to not give up? Because it's easy for people to look at things as too challenging to overcome. How do you get them to really get into that mindset of, hey, I can do this, or I can give it a try?
It's a great question. I think that, it goes back to, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. And what I've tried to instill is, focusing on the process versus the outcomes, right? So if you get outcome focused, the outcome's important, but only so much as that you scope your process, right? And if you're continually focused on that outcome and you're not seeing those returns on investment, not everything that you're doing in that process is going to give you that return. But in the aggregate, it should lead to those outcomes. So I think finding those small wins, finding those how they say you're 80-20.
Yeah.
So finding those 20% of things that's going to lead to 80% of your outcome, and those individual things that kind of make it up in the aggregate, identifying those things and celebrating the wins, right? There's an opportunity when, for example, there's smaller wins that you can celebrate. For instance, when you were launching that online program for the last several weeks, there were a bunch of little things throughout that, whether it was marketing, whether it was, doing the training, whether it was pulling all the stakeholders together, really celebrating those wins that led to a successful launch, right? Now, if we were always focused on that outcome, we may have overlooked bits and pieces that largely you did throughout that process. But what I try to do is, take a look around throughout the process and look where you can identify and celebrate, some of those smaller wins that are leading to a better outcome.
And that's important, right? And so many times we get focused on the outcome, and because we're not seeing the results, and then I always talk about, people get caught up. It's not a 30, 60, 90-day return, right? It takes a while. In the book, Atomic Habits, he talks about just what you mentioned, the incremental successes. And that's important to understand. Once you get in the process, you just get in the process and you keep working, because that's where I go to, I did the workout video, Insanity, which was crazy, man. It was crazy. Yeah. But after the 30, 60 days, I'm like, I don't look like any of these people on here. But even still, I wanted my t-shirt because I was finished, and I'd take a break. So a lot of people think after that 60 days, I should see the results that I expected to see. And then you take a break and you stop. But it's in the processes where I was like, man, I felt better when I'm in the process, when I'm doing the work. So I think
that's building on those habits. I really like that book, Atomic Habits. And one of the things that I really took out of that book was the stacking.
Yes.
Where you look throughout your day where you can stack some of those habits that are not only reminders, but it's more efficient.
Yeah.
And it you don't know how efficient you can be. It's once you really start, identifying some of those habits and stacking them and sticking to them and having that discipline to stick to those habits,
Yeah.
it could change your life.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I think it's important because you forget about the habits and behaviors. You think a lot of people, they think it's an overnight success, but it's the work that you put in, and most people don't want to put that work in. And so it's encouraging to find people like you who are putting that work in. I talk about the process, and we talked about the mindset of learning. You continuing to go, even though you struggle through high school, you continue to go through college, get your Ph.D. But talk about that, the struggle that you had during those time frames. Now, I don't know where you were married and the children came in to play at that time, but talk about the struggle that you have. Because I think that's very interesting because most people will look at their schedule, their time that they have, and go, I can't move forward with my dream because I got to start right here. So talk to me about that mindset.
So I got married fairly young. I was probably 20, 25. And so it was met my wife close to a little over 20 years ago. So we've been together forever. She's been with me since language school. And I would
You've
say,
locked in on her and she's not going anywhere.
yep, yep. And I would say that by and large, I wouldn't have been able to do any of it without her. Right.
Gotcha.
So having that support system in place, in particular, the last several years with the doctoral program, there was a lot of things that I had to give up. And the first thing that went away were my hobbies. So between shooting, jiu-jitsu, golfing, fishing, a lot of my personal relationships with some of my friends suffered because I wanted to minimize the amount of impact that it had on my family, and it still had an impact. There was soccer practices I couldn't go to, and the girls' jiu-jitsu, and my wife picked up a lot of that load. Whether it was taking care of the girls, doing the extracurriculars while I'm writing a paper. I couldn't have done it without her. And I think more than anything, having that support system and developing your crew early, it's essential. Because you can't, a lot of these things you can't do on your own. You can try, and whether that's having a family, whether that's having a social support structure and a good network. I think a lot of times we underappreciate how much others have contributed to our success. And at least for myself, like my wife is listed, as kind of the first shout out in my dissertation because I wouldn't have gotten it without her.
Hey, and that's great to have, man. And that's, and even with her cooperating and working with you and the children understanding things, there's still some self-talk that we have to give ourselves, right? Because anytime, because it's, you may not call it a setback or anything, but it's a challenge, it's a hurdle that you got to overcome. What's some of the self-talk that you had to have with yourself, have with you, and remind you to keep going?
I'd have to say, first and foremost, is I don't know if you've ever read the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Phenomenal book. So the crux of it is that whenever you're faced with something, either a setback or some sort of thing that you didn't intend, some negative situation, between what you experience and your response, there's a space.
Okay.
And where that space is, that's where your power lies. So I think how I've tried to deal with it, that was probably one of the most formative books I've ever read. And he took that
Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes, it was Viktor Frankl.
Okay.
And he developed that perspective through the concentration camps. He was a survivor of the concentration camps back during World War II. And it was, for me, it was very, very formative in the way that I approached issues, because, I realized that it wasn't so much my experiences that were the negative experiences that were, inhibiting me. It was my response to those negative experiences. And just having that wherewithal to take a moment, recognize what's occurring, and recognizing your power and your response to it. And that can be as simple as, somebody getting out of line with you in a professional working environment. This could be, some massive tragedy in your personal life. But the same principle applies. And I've tried to really take that on, because I think that, Viktor Frankl developed this approach in the worst of human circumstances.
Yeah.
And then I think that, in that, it's applicable just about anything that you're faced with. The second thing is comparing yourself to others, recognizing that, you're going to have setbacks, you're going to have challenges. That, I think it was Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt said that comparison is the thief of joy, right? So you can't compare yourself to where others are. You're running your own race, right?
Yes.
And I
agree.
And there's a book, 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. It was also fairly formative in my development. And one of his rules was compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who somebody else is today. And I think that really captures, my approach to it of, everybody has their own path. Some folks you look at and, it's they might be further along in something, but you don't know their story. You don't know that their family's falling apart, that, the things that they did to get to that point. They burned all their bridges. They may have had help that you didn't have or resources you didn't have. It doesn't matter. You're running your own race. You may look at that and say, okay, that this person attained this. What things might I do? Might they have done that I can replicate? And that's fine. I think Tony Robbins does a lot of that, of like looking at how somebody achieves success in a certain area, and then finding out what they did and seeing what works for you and what you can replicate. Because there's no need to reinvent the wheel, but I think that you also have to be mindful of not comparing yourself, because it's that can be very, very detrimental to just your mental health and your mindset. Well, so I think more than anything, being focused on the discipline vice the motivation, right?
Okay.
So, to me, I think it's important to be motivated, but motivation doesn't last. I think that the whole Zig Ziglar line of, you're comparing it to bathing, right? You need that daily. And I think that motivation comes and goes, but when you're disciplined in what you do, that carries you through when that motivation's lacking. So that's kind of how I've tried to approach it, through focusing on my response to things, and focusing on kind of where I'm at in the race, right? Try not to focus on others and focus on, where they are versus where I am, or what they've done to me to impede what I'm trying to do. you focus on your race and you run it as hard as you can. And, generally speaking, you'll have more successes than failures, in my opinion.
I agree with you on that one. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about my progress. I just had to be progressive. Very important.
Yeah.
So talk to me. So one of the things I think is important is your ability to adapt and adjust. And do you agree with that? Because most people say, well,
Yeah.
I set this plan and the plan didn't work.
Yep. I think it was Mike Tyson said that everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the face.
Right.
And I learned pretty early in the Army, I think it was Murphy's Laws, that no plan survives first contact intact. Right. So first contact in the Army is when you make contact with the enemy, bullets start flying. Every plan looks perfect in the abstract, but once that faces with reality, and once you make that first contact, the plan falls apart. And it's your ability to adapt, to look at the situation, to say, okay, how do I need to adjust to get the outcomes that I'm looking for? And I think it's that's a learned ability, because just speaking from personal experience, that was learned the hard way. Because I'm a good planner. I like to think that I'm a good planner, but I think where I've had difficulty is making those adjustments. Right, so you're going in with a number of assumptions, and some of those assumptions might be true. Some of them probably ain't. Most of them aren't exactly true to the perspective to the point that you think they are. So recognizing where you might be wrong, I think that's a big one. Where you start out and some of your going in assumptions, just it's that Mark Twain line of it's not what we don't know that gets us in trouble. It's what we know for absolutely certain. It just ain't so.
Right.
And I think recognizing those, once you kind of get things going, have the humility to know, to recognize that you're not going to go into it with all the information. You're going to be wrong.
Yeah.
And to listen to your folks, listen to what they're telling you, because you may think that the situation is A, B, and C, but that's just kind of a keyhole that you're looking through. And the more input that you're taking from your team, the greater your perspective and the more nuanced your perspective is. And I think that that's what I found is your ability to listen and actively listen, and especially when it's not congruent with your perspective, right? So those times when your folks, your peers, your counterparts, or even your competition is telling you that you're wrong, you got to listen to it, because more often than not, they're at least a little bit right. And if you're not listening to that, you can miss those signals that are telling you that you need to adjust. May not be a complete 180 adjustment or even a 90 degrees, but just those little minor rudder adjustments. Because at the end of the day, the longer that you wait to adjust, the more you have to adjust, right? So you think about like a ship's trajectory, and you realize that you're going the wrong trajectory and you need to adjust. You only need to make small incremental adjustments early on. But if you get 75% of the way there and you realize that you should have adjusted rudder 2 weeks ago or 2 weeks before, those are huge adjustments. And I think whether you're leading a team or leading an organization, those minor adjustments and course corrections will save you from a lot of heartache down the road when you're just fishtailing the organization all over the place. And you realize that, oh yeah, Eric was right 3 weeks ago when he told me I shouldn't have done this. And now, I gotta, massively change what we're doing. So I think more than anything is just being mindful that you don't know everything. recognizing that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room.
Right.
And listening. And as you progress, on a project or an effort, to listen to folks, listen to stakeholders, listen to your gut. And as you learn more, there's going to be times where you're getting indications that what you're doing isn't working. It's okay, adjust. And just having that humility to recognize that you're not gonna, your plan is never going to be perfect, but you have good decisions, you have bad decisions, you have no decisions. I make a decision, and it's never going to be a perfect decision. You just got to figure out what's working and what's not working, and fix it along the way, because the worst thing you can do is nothing.
Yeah. And if you've done nothing, you've actually done something that's not going to turn out well.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. I think you touched on quite a few things, and I think Carol Dweck talks about it too, that fixed mindset of, like I said, I have a plan and this is the way it's going to work. You use Mike Tyson, and I think Mike Tyson even countered, or basically demonstrated his saying when he said that people have plans until they get punched in the mouth. Because when you saw Mike Tyson get knocked down, he didn't know what to do. He's looking for his mouthpiece, and he couldn't get back to his feet. Whereas Buster Douglas, who he knocked down a couple of rounds before, quickly got up off his feet because he knew the only way I can win this fight is if I get back on my feet. So very important point you made there. So let me ask you this. What would be some advice that you would leave? I mean, you've left several nuggets. You left several nuggets in here. But as we close this out, what would be some advice that you would lead future leaders? Matter of fact, let's look at your youth program, those youth that you coach. What would be some of the advice that you really instill in them as you set them on the path of continuously learning and working to become the best versions of them?
So I coach U10 girls soccer, rec, and some of the things that I try to instill in them is, at that level, you're just trying to instill love for the game first and foremost, right? And my coaching philosophy that I've gone forward with is really, really simple. It's keep it safe, keep it fun, keep it real, right? So in those three domains, if it's not safe, it's not fun, right? Nothing gets done if somebody gets hurt. It has to be fun for them to want to join up next season. My success metric is how many re-sign up for my team the following year, right? If they're excited about the game of soccer, I love soccer. And if I'm teaching them just little things along the way and they love the game, great. Then finally, keeping it real, it's U10 soccer. You focus on those things that you can work on and help them develop as players, but it's U10 soccer. There's no screaming at the ref. There's no, screaming at the players. It's U10 soccer. And you have to just take a step back and, recognize that it's you're in it for the long game. I think that, what I've tried to instill in them is just a love for the game, a work ethic. And when they do win, I try to highlight those things that they've done during the game that they've been working on, that they've been working hard at. And to get that connection with them, say, oh, yeah, I was working on that and I had success. So being able to reinforce that input output. And if I can even just plant that seed with them of the harder I work, the better the outcome's going to be. That's a win.
Yeah, I like that, man. Now, playing sports, we know that game film makes you better. It points out what you're doing well, and it points out what you're not doing so well, but it also points out some things that you don't even see yourself. So as a coach, as a team, you think you're doing things great or you think you're doing something wrong, but you don't see where there's like that I would say minuscule, I would say that correctly, right? There's a small area that we sometimes miss that will help us improve, whether it be our approach to the ball, whether it be how we're viewing the field. So there's so many different things that game film allows us to do. So if we keep rehearsing or going over what we did and how we performed, we definitely get better. So I definitely appreciate your time, Giuseppe, man. Thank you. You dropped some serious nuggets here with the books, the tips. I love that. Is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with before we go?
I would say probably the most important piece of leadership, right? If I were to leave a nugget, is self-leadership, right? So everybody's focused on their ability to influence, their ability to, create a vision for others to follow. If you don't have your stuff together, nobody's going to follow you. You think about some of the worst leaders that you've ever had, those were the folks that were the least able to lead themselves, right? And manage themselves, whether it's managing what they're doing, how they're doing it, managing their time, managing their emotions. If you want to be a good leader, focus on leading yourself. That's the foundation for which everything else is built. So that's what I would leave you with.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Giuseppe Fielder dropping some serious success nuggets for leadership and just leading yourself, leading organizations, and just coaching others. With that, I want to thank you all for tuning in. Doc, thanks for joining us. I appreciate your time. Until next week, just keep pushing and never stop. Take care.
Thank you for joining The Momentum Shift, a show bringing you interviews and stories of incredible people to help you get inspired, get moving, and get results to ultimately create the life-changing momentum shift that will improve your life. Join host Eric Collier, the mayor of motivation and mental quicksand expert, every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern for The Momentum Shift, the show and change you've been looking for.